Welcome once again to the So Weird podcast. I'm Zach.
I'm Kat.
I'm Kathy.
And I'm Jimmy.
And tonight we are very thankful to have a special guest with us. We are talking to an actor with over 20 years of experience in film and television. But to listeners of this podcast, he's probably best known as Rick Phillips, Fiona's absentee father, deceased missing father, from the Disney Channel show So Weird, of course, the topic of the show. We are very pleased to have with us tonight Mr. Chris Gibson. How are you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with the questions here. I have one little question for you, which is, how did you become interested in acting? And specifically, how did you come to be involved with So Weird?
Okay, the acting, I did some theater arts in high school, but I was intending to become an animator, and that was always my focus. But when it came down to applying for college, I I noticed there was a drama course, and I just thought that it was something that I might like to try. So I flipped a coin, if you can believe that, and it came up for drama, and I took drama. So that was the course that I went on for about 24 years. Oh, second part. The So Weird. Well, I moved to Vancouver from Toronto in '96, the end of '96, and I found an agent in Vancouver. As it usually happens, I got the audition for So Weird. Now, this was for a casting agent I hadn't actually seen before. And so it was kind of nerve-wracking to go in. He was one of the most important casting agents in the city, and I felt a real affinity for that scene. Basically, the scene that we did was the scene from Twin, and this very, very tall casting agent played Fiona and was kneeling on the floor, and we did the scene, and it was very emotional. So it was one of those times where you do a scene and things go well. And Ali Matheson was there, and we talked with her a little bit, and I felt really good about it. Anyway, I know that they saw lots of people, and I did not get a call back, I don't think. I'm pretty sure I didn't go back in and read again. I think they decided in about a week or 2 weeks that I was the one that they wanted. And that was it.
Oh, very straightforward.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Good. We're glad they chose you.
No,
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the So Weird podcast with us. It's really a pleasure to be able to speak with you. And my first question for you is all about the behind the scenes stuff that happened with So Weird. Because you were only in a few episodes physically present as yourself, but the character of Rick is so present throughout the entire series through photographs and montages and references. So a lot of what we see of Rick is through photographs. So each time you came on the show, how did they get those photographs? Did they have you do a photo montage one day? Did you have to give in photos of yourselves each time? Did you come in? Did you take more photos?
It seems to me that we did a few of those kinds of days where I'd go in and do photo, video montages. Walking with Mackenzie, kissing, holding hands, that kind of romantic stuff. I remember 2 or 3 times when we did photo shoots, and just went around and took photos, and those are the photos that you see in the episodes. And I can't remember actually how many photos were used. I haven't looked at all the episodes again. I know you very kindly sent me the link, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I haven't, like you, I haven't seen a lot of the episodes again for probably 20 years. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, hard for me to remember.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
All right. And my first question is, you talked about Allie, so I want to know if you got to meet and work with Allie Marie Matheson and John Cooksey.
I'm sorry, did I work with them?
Yeah, like, did you meet them and did you work with them? Like, were they on set for an episode or so?
Yes, yes and no, I guess. I don't know that they were always there. I remember John being there more than Allie, I think. And they had me over to dinner with Mackenzie and I think Squatch and I'm not sure who else was there. I think probably quite a few people were there. I don't think Fiona was there, or Kara, or Patrick. So yeah, I mean, when he was there, he was very enthusiastic. I think I mentioned to you, Kathy, I think it was to you that he would come up to me and talk to me about the arc of the character and talk about the third season and things like that. I don't recall an awful lot of what he said, but he was always really, really, you could tell, I mean, he was like a kid, really. I mean, he had his hooks into that show, and you could tell that he was really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Wow. So my question, Chris, is what was the first real job that you ever had as an adult or as a young teen?
The first acting job or any job?
First, any job, like real job, like where you're making money,
Okay.
you're on your own.
I worked in a gas station when I was in high school. It was
Wow.
a car wash as well. So we used to put cars onto the car wash rack and fill up cars with gas. Pretty basic job.
Well, I think we can all relate to that. All right. So the next question here is actually from our co-host Emily, who couldn't be with us tonight, but she wants to know, through our research on the show, we have learned that the Phillips Kane band went double platinum on one of their albums. Do you have any idea that they were that popular? And do you think you would have liked their music?
I did have probably again through John and maybe Mackenzie as well, that the band was established as being very prominent. And as far as the music, I think, the guy who sang that was my voice. His voice was amazing, and I'm sure I probably would have liked music. Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, what was it like filming in Other Worlds, the song where you're on stage with Molly lip syncing and David Steele was providing the vocals? Were you actually singing yourself and then they dubbed it, or were you lip syncing the entire time?
I was lip syncing, and I seem to remember that when I appeared, because I obviously wasn't on stage the whole time, I guess I just walked in. I can't really remember, but yeah. And so I learned that song, or I learned the portion that I had to sing, I guess. And we obviously rehearsed it as well. So yeah, it was just practicing to lip sync it and make sure that it looked good. Again, I have to say that it was 20 years ago, so
Yeah.
it's hard to remember.
Yeah. Especially
Thank
with
you.
like other roles going on after as well. So do you remember what it was like working with Mackenzie, since many of your scenes were with her?
Well, she was wonderful. We became friendly, and because, like you say, most of our scenes were together. You see her on film or on TV, and you see how she is, and that's the way she is. I mean, she's very down to earth, And she's been doing this for a long time too. So she's at home, I think, in her element. She's been through an awful lot. I'm sure you're aware of everything that she's been through. And she was just, she was really great to be with, because she would be helpful. I mean, she wasn't standoffish. She was, like I say, she was just a wonderful person.
Mhm.
I can't say enough about her. She's great.
Yeah, it's always so heartwarming to hear how everybody reflects on the show so fondly, like they had a good time on set. It's always good to hear.
Yeah, I being on a lot of sets, you sometimes are on a set where people are really miserable for one reason or another. It wasn't like that on So Weird. It was really, really, you got the feeling that people really liked being there.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
So my next question is a little bit about So Weird. I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but in one of your correspondences with our podcast, you had mentioned that you had received a residual check. And I was wondering, well, we would all presume that that could potentially mean that Disney may have plans for the future of the show. But had you ever seen anything like that before, or had your Disney So Weird residuals stopped and then begin again at some point in time over the last 20 years? If you don't mind sharing that.
No, not at all. I mean, with residual checks here in Canada, anyway, they do a buyout. So I think, I mean, this was going back. I've been out of work as an actor now for about 14 years, so I haven't been doing it. I don't quite know what the agreements are here in Canada anymore. But back then it was, I think, a 5-year buyout. So they would buy you out, and then you wouldn't see a residual check until either another country purchased the rights, I guess, to show the series, or like I say, the 5 years would pass and then they would renew it. And I can't remember the last time that I got a So Weird residual check. It was quite a while ago. So that's why, now again, I don't know that that's what's going on.
Sure.
But when I heard what you were saying on the podcast, and obviously your hope and strong desires for that to happen, I thought, well, maybe that's what it was. And so I thought I'd mention it. And I hope I didn't get everyone too hyped up, because, it may not be true, but it does seem sort of significant that the timing wise, that I received those checks. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And I think it is supposed to go online, the streaming service, sometime later this year.
Yeah. They've mentioned like all their old movies coming back, but they have not said anything about their old shows. So that's why it's like we still have like our hopes are like maybe one, and then you gave us like another like one, like, but not too high, but like, oh, maybe.
Cautiously optimistic.
I think they're gonna have to find a lot of programming. Not that they don't have a lot of programming that they can rely on, but yeah, I think there is reason to hope for it, for sure.
Can I just say I love you so much for giving us that hope. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
I really hope I'm not wrong.
We do too. And we know like it's a long shot, but it's nice to have hope.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, the next question from Emily here, she asks this every time we have a guest on the show, which is, have you ever experienced anything supernatural? And if not, what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?
Well, the short answer is yes.
We like that answer.
Yeah, this is the weirdest thing, did you say, that's ever happened to me?
Yes.
Yeah. This would probably have to be like an 8-part answer, I think. I'll give you like a short overview of the kind of the weirdest stuff that happened. And I really believe that I had a supernatural experience when my father died. He died when I was 14. So I'll just mention that off the top. And it had to do with basically his last breath and how that affected me. And that came into play a little bit later on in my life, well, much later on, actually. And for the most part, nothing was really going on supernaturally when I was doing the show. But about 11 years ago, I started to do ayahuasca ceremonies. And I don't know if you have any idea what that is. But if you go down to Peru or places in South America, you can go to, it's a big tourist business now, to do ayahuasca ceremonies. And people who have done this and who have written about it talk about it as if it is experiencing higher consciousness. And I think I would have to agree with that. In the New Age, which I was very much a part of at that time, the whole emphasis was on opening yourself up, and you do that meditating, breathing, and the chakras and all that stuff. Ayahuasca kind of blows you open, to put it bluntly. So when I was doing that, I did it for about 4 years. And I mean, the very first time I did it, I had a spirit or something speak to me. I was shown what my father went through when he was dying of cancer. Sort of went along and saw it from his shoes. Really quite bizarre. But gave me a compassion and an understanding of what that must have been like. I had those kinds of experiences quite a bit doing it. I went down to Peru and I did 8 ceremonies there. So all told, in the space of about 4 years, I did about 29 of these ceremonies. And as I say, it was the first time that I'd ever been aware of the spirit world. And I thought it was pretty cool. But there is another side to this that I would continue with. I don't know if you want to hear it, but
Yes.
I will continue if you want.
Yes.
Sure.
Definitely.
I didn't know this was going to be the last one, but the very last ceremony that I did, I met a girl and we became friends. I had just been laid off my job, and so she gave me work in her retail store, which was in my hometown here. And through her, I got to meet a Christian lady who was helping. Gina was the girl that whose store I was working in. And Emily was the Christian lady. And I thought that and we're really good friends now, so I can say this, but I thought she was nuts. And she was very in your face. She said to me right off the bat, you don't know what you're doing with these things. She said, you're on slippery ground here, that you're in grave danger. And she convinced me at some point to pray to Jesus. She wanted me to pray to Jesus, and I didn't want to pray to Jesus. And I should mention also that I was a Christian when I was about 14. After my dad died, I became a Christian, and then I fell away from that big time. And I didn't really want to have anything to do with Jesus at that point when Emily asked me to pray. So I said, okay, I'll pray to the creator of all things. How's that? And she said, that's fine. And she said, ask the creator of all things to show you why you shouldn't do these ayahuasca ceremonies anymore. So I did, and I didn't expect an answer. I was totally cynical about that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but things started to happen almost immediately. I didn't put it together. I moved in with Gina because her sister had moved out, and I moved in, and basically it was a big house, and so she needed someone to help pay the rent. And I wouldn't see her at work, and I also didn't see her at home over long periods of time, like 3-4 days, something like that. And I wondered what was going on. And finally she came out at one point, and she looked like she had been dragged through a field or been through some huge experience that she looked exhausted. She looked terrible. And I said, "What's going on?" And she said that people were practicing sorcery on her, casting spells. And she was so not matter of fact, she was just, I think she was so exhausted from what she'd been through that she just had that delivery when she said it. That was, she didn't really care. I think she took a second before she answered. She probably thought, should I tell him or just not, But I think she wanted to confide because she was going through this all by herself, and except for Emily. And she said what she said, and I believed her. Just looking at her and the way she said it, I believed her, and my whole foundation kind of shifted with that. I realized that, oh my goodness, this is really happening. So what happened after that was an incident with this kind of flavor. I went to Emily's house, and Emily came over to our place and removed entities from Gina in the name of Jesus Christ. And, it wasn't like what you see in TV, but it was pretty amazing. I remember one time she showed up and she showed up at our place and she said, "Oh, there's something on the house. Someone put a spell on it." And she removed it in the name of Jesus Christ. And I felt a physical sensation of something that's being lifted off me. And my mind cleared. It was like a whole fogginess. And I hadn't noticed any of this until she actually, took it away. And what I understood later, this took me a while. I became a Christian because of this, but I had this most amazing conversion experience in Gina's store, which I'll tell you about later. But just to, basically cap off the story, I realized, and I had further experiences later on my own, where I actually believed I was attacked by a demon, and I had a heart attack. I almost died of cardiac arrest. I know you're probably thinking, who is this guy? Where, but I'm used to telling the story and people not really believing it. But I believe that I was attacked, and I woke up in hospital after 5 days of being in a coma, and my family was gathered there, and they were very happy to see me because they thought that I was going to be brain damaged because I was without oxygen for so long. So it was really quite amazing, and I'm writing about it. The bottom line here is that I believe God was trying to tell me that these entities that I thought were so pleasurable, were so nice in the ayahuasca experiences, were deceiving me, and that He was showing me the true side of who these spirits were. So I'll just leave it there. I mean, you can ask me some questions about it if you want to. I know it's a little out there. So there you go.
Wow, that's far out.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.
I'm Catholic, and I've been to a meeting where we had like one of the 12 exorcists in the world came and gave a talk about his experiences. So I find all of this so fascinating. What are you writing right now? Is it like a memoir of the experience itself?
Kind of, yeah. It starts with my dad's death because that's where my spiritual journey began.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that I heard, actually, I wasn't doing ayahuasca, and I don't know that when I was doing the ceremonies, whether or not God was protecting me. He may have been actually protecting me from spirits, but at the same time, He wanted me to see what I was flirting with. He wanted me to understand that if I were to continue doing this, that these are the types of entities that I was dealing with. And I've done a lot of research into this. In the Bible, it talks about in Genesis 6, a lot of people call them fallen angels. There's a book by Dr. Michael Heiser called The Unseen Realm, and he basically says that they are God's divine counsel. They're called the sons of God. The sons of God come down and have children by human women. And the Bible doesn't tell you very much about it, except that giants are born as offspring of this union between humans and angels or divine beings.
The Nephilim.
The Nephilim, yeah. And in the book of Enoch, which is not considered a canon book, except I think in the Coptic Christian faith, I think it is, but they get into it a lot more in the book of Enoch, and they describe what these entities brought down. Basically, they started witchcraft. They brought down knowledge from heaven and they gave it to these women. And they began to practice sorcery, apparently. And part of the knowledge that they gave was the knowledge of plants and roots, which is exactly what I was doing in the ayahuasca, because it's made from a vine that grows naturally in South America. And it's put together with another plant. They have to have a combination of two plants to make it work. And so this medium of ayahuasca, this tool, I guess you would say, was something that these beings were using to open up humans so that they could be better penetrated by spirits, I believe. And that's the deception. I mean, you think that you're opening yourself up and it's just wonderful. And I was having wonderful experiences, but that's what they say in the Bible, is that these demons will pose as beings of light, and it's very deceptive.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it. And like when it's done, when you're done writing it, it's something I definitely want to check out.
So that's what I'm writing about. And yeah, so my experiences with all of this stuff. I mean, I've just given you a really short blast of it, but it was really, there's a lot more detail, and there's so many more experiences that I haven't really told you about. The guy, when I was, sorry if I'm interrupting, I'll just throw this last thing in. The fellow that, when I had the heart attack, I was working with disabled adults, and this family that I was working with, I had to go into their home, and the father would sit in the mornings sometimes with me and talk to me about the fact, when he found out I was a Christian, he found out that, I just recently been converted, and he started telling me about his son, who he said was possessed by a demon. And the son himself agreed and said, yes, he was. But it was all like, he was very friendly, and I didn't see it at that time. And it was maybe 2 months working with him, when one day I just suddenly became aware of it. And I could just see it behind his eyes, and I could feel the menace, and I felt like the hair on my body all stand up. It was quite frightening. And I thought I should get out of here, but then I decided not to. I was pretty naive at the time. I didn't try to protect myself. And I went back to work with him maybe once or twice more before I had the heart attack. I woke up in the hospital, and when people told me what had happened, I just immediately said, I was attacked by a demon. And I started telling everybody this. And they were so happy to see that I was okay. They kind of let that slide for a while, but when I kept going on about it, they thought, that it was a bit crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I'm like, whenever you're done writing that, I definitely want to read that as well.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I've started writing again recently. As you know, I've had some health issues, and I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Well, I've been fighting cancer for the last year. Prostate cancer, like my dad. I was scared to death when I got the diagnosis, because watching my dad die, that was pretty scary, but he never checked himself out. He was in the Second World War, and he was pulling people out of airplanes that were, badly injured, and he was frightened to go to hospitals. And when they found it in him, it was very far gone. So he lasted probably 6 months, and it was not pretty. But at the same time, I got my spiritual journey started. It was like, I call it the parting gift, basically, from my dad. And he wasn't religious, unless maybe he had a religious experience or an experience with God while he was going through that. I'm sure it was very lonely. judging from the ayahuasca experience that I had about that. Yeah, so we thought that we caught it in time, and we did an operation, and it was in my lymph nodes. They don't know how long it was there, so they started me on treatment. And the treatment is not chemo or radiation, it's actually hormone therapy. So they give me a drug that stops the male hormone in my body. So I don't have any male hormone in my body right now. So it's a little weird. And as you can imagine how important hormones are to everything in your body, it's doing some weird stuff. Anyway. And I've gained about 40 pounds. It's sort of like instantly being turned 15 years older in a way. But, tomorrow I actually go for my blood test. So I'm hoping that, it's going to be okay. I'll find out in a couple of days, probably.
We're all rooting for you.
I'm in good spirits. I feel good.
Good.
Yeah.
Getting back to So Weird, though.
Okay.
Sorry to make you think back 20 years, but this is something that I've always wondered about. In a season 2 episode, Nightmare, they have this scene where it's a flashback to the night Rick died, and Rick is arguing with Molly, and Jack's there to see it. And you walk out past Jack as Jack's screaming, "No, Dad, don't stop." What was it like for you to just have to ignore Patrick Levis screaming in your face? Because I can't imagine that was easy. Do you remember ever breaking character? Was that difficult to accomplish?
Yeah, just no, it wasn't. That's part of what we do. I don't remember how many takes we did of that, but I don't think it was too many. Patrick was terrific, as you know. Yeah, it was pretty run of the mill. We shot it. It was not difficult. Yeah.
How do you just ignore somebody screaming in your face, though?
Yeah. Well, obviously you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I can answer that. It's just part of.
Yeah, I guess it's just an actor thing.
We have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I could never be an actor.
Tune it out. Yeah.
Okay, and my next question that I like to ask most of the people that come on our podcast, because they live in Canada, and I really like when I vacation there. What do you like about living in Vancouver and Canada in general?
Well, it's a beautiful country, as you have noticed, I'm sure. I grew up in the Toronto area, and I wasn't as fond of that area growing up there. And I went out west when I was, my very first time I went out west with my buddies when I was about 15, I think. We drove out one summer, and after that, I never wanted to live back east again, but I had to at that time because obviously I hadn't finished school. But when I became an actor, also all of the business really was out of Toronto at that time, and I worked at the Stratford Festival, Shakespearean Festival in Stratford, Ontario, which at that time was the biggest Shakespearean festival in North America. I don't know if it still is. An amazing experience. And so all of the work basically at that time was in that area, but Vancouver was starting to really explode. So after I finished Stratford, some of the guys that I met at Stratford, who were from Vancouver, I started seeing them on TV all the time. And the thing about Vancouver at that time is they didn't have as many actors. So there were more parts to go around. And that's when I decided, not immediately, but I thought, hey, I should go out there. It took me a while before I actually did it. But in '96, I made the journey. And I've been living here ever since. Now, the country here, the climate and everything is so much milder than the rest of Canada. I started playing soccer when I was about 39 years old. I had played when I was a kid, but you can play all year round here. So that was awesome. I love that. And right now, I don't play soccer anymore because my knees are completely screwed. But I ride my bike because it's very low impact. So all year round, I ride my bike through the rain, and it's very wet here. So you may not like the lack of light that is very typical for Vancouver. And one of the reasons that they shot shows like So Weird and also X-Files up here is because it has a very creepy factor because of that particular light. And the producers really like that. So they shot a lot of supernatural shows up here. And I think you're probably familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great climate. I mean, if you're living in Edmonton or in Winnipeg, it's not so much. It's cold. I don't know that you would like living there so much, but the whole country is very beautiful.
Thank you.
Cool.
So I've definitely, it's been 20 years, so I've tried to find as many of your projects as I could. And I've seen a lot of the things that you were in. I really liked you in Cold Squad. I saw you when you were a pilot in like a documentary. It was really cool. That was awesome. On your IMDb, I've looked up a few of the projects and I'm not able to spot you. So I just wanted to get your clarification if you were in a certain project.
Okay.
I read that you were in The Sopranos. Were you in an episode?
No.
Not true.
Probably another
Cool.
Chris.
And that's what I was thinking because there's a lot of Chris Gibsons on IMDb. But were you in Mysterious Ways,
Yes.
playing a fireman? You were. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Those are my clarifications. Thank you for being so honest with us, and I'm definitely keeping you in my prayers. I know you're really strong, and like Emily said, we are rooting for you. And I'm sorry, like Kat said, but thank you so much for being so honest with us. We really appreciate that, and we are looking forward to your book, definitely.
Wait till it gets published. I don't know if it will. It's a bit strange. So
maybe you can slide us a rough draft.
See what I can do.
I'm just kidding.
So I think that I actually want to say thank you to you. It's Jimmy, right?
Yeah.
Because when I would go on to YouTube to say, for instance, just recently, I had to do that to try and find a couple of things that I was in. It's because of you that I was able to find those things because you kept them active. I probably would never have been able to find them if it had not been for you. And you actually put my roles into sequence in sometimes I was able to find them like 3 or 4 of them in a row. And I think that you did that. And I'm very grateful for that. I mean, it made it so much easier for me to find those things. Like I say, I'm pretty sure after 14 years, they just wouldn't have been searchable. So cheers for that.
Well, thank you so much. And I just feel really connected to the cast of the show. I don't know. I have my own personal story with why I'm obsessed with the show, but I just felt connected to you through the television. And I had to, and I have a couple of your projects that YouTube won't let me upload. So if you need those, I can send you like full episodes or whatever you need. What I have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Outer Limits was one, I think. Yeah, we also did a lot. I mean, this was pretty typical of wherever they're shooting, I'm sure, in Toronto or in Georgia or wherever else they're shooting these days. They'll do pilot seasons, and so you end up getting a lot of work on shows that never really get picked up. So I can't even remember some of the shows that I worked on because they never made it to air. Or if they did air, they only aired for a little while and then they were just dropped, So there were shows like that. I really can't remember the name of them even.
Those are the little gems that fans like me love, like I love little bit roles and bit parts because it just expands on who that person is as an actor. And I love the actors that I love, and you are one of them. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's very generous. And I just, I'm thinking that you guys were pretty young when you were watching this show. I think the target audience was probably, 10 to 16. I don't know. I'm just sort of guessing, but you were probably younger than that, right?
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yeah.
I was 6.
Yeah, I think I was
Yeah.
like 6, 7.
I can see why it would have made such an impression. What were you going to say, Anthony?
Oh, I was just going to say I was about 10 or so when the show began airing, I think.
Okay.
I was about 11, 12, 13 when it really took off for me, and I was like, this is everything. The show is just so real, but yet it's based off supernatural, but the family aspect of it kind of hit home for me, like not having parents there, so I could really identify with the lead character that Kara was playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I did as well because I lost my dad when I was just a kid. So when I went in for that audition, part of the reason I did have that emotion for the audition was because of that. I think I really felt that that yearning that she had to know her father, to have contact with him, and it was quite heartbreaking. And she, of course, I mean, she was amazing. I mean, I didn't really work with Kara. I would see her around sometimes on set. She was probably going to school, like having tutoring and things like that, and so we never really got a chance to have any kind of relationship whatsoever. And then we did that scene in Twin, and she's amazing. She really is. And none of these guys are acting anymore except for Mackenzie, as far as I know. I mean, I think maybe, I don't know about Squatch. I don't know about Belinda and the Canadian.
Yeah, I think Squatch does like small roles here and there.
Uh-huh.
I think Belinda is like in the music industry in Vancouver.
Yeah. But Eric Lively and Patrick and Kara don't have anything recent. I think Patrick was the most recent. I think 2016 was something, because I just recently went and checked just to see what he was up to.
Yeah, he did a couple Hallmark movies, but I
Okay.
think right now he's focused on ministry.
Yeah, he was Christian, and is that Christian ministry? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So Zach, I think you have Corey's question next.
Okay, I'm going to take Corey. All right, this is from one of our listeners on Twitter. Corey would like to know about the thought process that went into the reshoots of Twin and your feelings upon finding out that the story would no longer be continued in season 3.
Well, obviously disappointment. When that decision was made, it's kind of interesting to try and pinpoint that, because they shot the episode where Rick basically falls down into the earth with fighting the spirit, and then they called us in and we did some voice. We had to correct some of the sound because when we shot that, it was in downtown Vancouver on top of the Hotel Vancouver, and the weather was just dreadful, and we had to go into the studio and do some of the sound on it. And I wasn't told anything that I recall until I was called into the very first episode of the next season, and I don't think I even knew that they were changing things around. I think that I was just called in. This is what I remember anyway. And then I found out when I actually got on set.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a bit of, as I recall anyway, it was a surprise to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we did, I think I told you guys, that's when we did the reshoot. And they had a little set right there that they built that looked just like the rooftop. And we shot it. We shot the scenes that they needed for that reshoot to neatly sum it up and to give it a pseudo happy ending. So that was kind of strange, and there was a real weird feeling on the set because of all the changes that were being made. Probably a lot of sadness, on the part of the main cast, who were saying goodbye to Kara, and probably questioning where the direction of the show was going. I don't know how much they knew. I expect probably Mackenzie had some idea, though I don't know that for sure. But yeah, I think it was a surprise for me anyway. I can't really talk about anybody else, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.
And then what was it like for you when you got called back to reprise the role of Rick for an episode in season 3? Did it feel significantly different compared to your experiences in filming season 2?
Not really, because as you are aware, all I did was basically do one of the Rick walking away from Molly singing
Mhm.
Yeah.
and looking back. Actually, it wasn't me at first; it was the other guy, and then I transformed into him. So it was kind of like been there, done that before. It was nice to go back and to see everybody. Obviously, it was a surprise to me. I didn't think I was going to be called, so it was pleasant to be able to do that. And I didn't get a sense of what everyone was thinking. Sometimes on set you go in and you just you go in and you do your thing and you wrapped, and that's the way it was that day. I was sort of in and out, and I was gone. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and another question from Emily is, when you're shooting the ending of Twin, did you do any stunt work, or was there like a stunt person when Rick was getting thrown over the side of the building?
There was a stunt person, and they asked me if I wanted to do it because I guess they would. It was very safe. Basically, they built up a wall, a fake wall that looked exactly like the edge of the building. As you remember, Fiona gets pushed over that edge, and so it's raised from the level of the rooftop maybe several feet. So they built up a faux wall, a fake wall, and they had I don't know, I can't remember exactly, probably a camera coming at me as if it was a spirit about to attack me. And I believe that I just jumped backwards over the wall and then fell probably several feet to some mats, some very, very comfortable mats. So we tried it a few times. It looked easy to me. I had no problem with it. And we shot it. Yeah. So I think they were pleased that they could use the actor in a situation like that, and it really wasn't very dangerous. So that's what we did.
Oh, did you get to see the ending? Because one of the questions was if you own or if you've ever seen like the original ending.
I never did. No.
Okay.
Oh,
I'd love to.
Me too.
be so cool.
Us too.
Yeah. So I'm gonna skip some of these questions, but because you've already sort of answered a bit of how you felt about the switch from the second to the third season there. But a question here from Spencer on Twitter was, when they were developing the original season 3, I know you had mentioned you had corresponded with Kathy about that John had been telling you sort of what was going to happen with Rick in the later seasons or the third season. But were you brought in, or what sort of development did you know about that never happened, if you could share that?
Only what John Cooksey told me. And I don't remember if that was on set or whether he took me aside. He probably did it more than once. And again, I'm afraid to say, the 20 years is really a bit of a barrier here for me. But, again, he just very enthusiastically told me that he was planning to bring Rick back to life. I don't remember the details very much about that. He was really tickled with the whole thing and wanted me to know. He was just wanting to share that with me. And I think to get me excited about it. He wanted me to feel, I think, his own excitement. I think that's why he was doing it. And I'm just guessing at that. I never asked him, like, why are you telling me this? That was my impression, that he was just so enthusiastic about it. And I think he would have loved to have shot that third season. I know he answered your questions, and he's obviously moved on. But he did admit that he was very engaged in that third season. He had an emotional engagement with that show, I think, unlike other work that he's been involved in since, I believe is what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's the impression I got from listening to your podcast anyway.
Yeah.
This is from Princess Fernandez on Facebook, one of our listeners, and she wants to know, is there any plot point from the original season 3 plans you would have liked to have seen played out, Rick-centric or not?
The only plans that I was aware of up until recently, until I listened to John Cooksey talk with you guys, was the Rick-centric stuff. And of course, I would have liked to have seen that. It would have been pretty interesting to see how that took shape, because I know that he hadn't actually written it at that time. So, they had these conceptions and then they went and actually wrote it. And sometimes it probably ended up being way cooler than, the actual concept was. So, one can only guess, what that would have looked like. And it would have been pretty exciting, I think, to have had that story arc realized, with Fee actually going and traveling to bring her father back. Can you imagine how excited you guys would have been about that? The rest of it, I'm trying to remember now what John was saying. I don't know that I can say anything more on that, because I really can't remember what his points were on the rest of the plans for that season.
Okay.
Thank you. So this is my favorite question to ask actors from the show. If you could pick one song that captures the essence of Rick Phillips, what song would it be?
I don't know if I can answer that or not. I guess the one that I sang, well, I didn't sing, but the one that Molly and Rick sing together when he appears on stage. Obviously, because you hear his voice, and that song had so much meaning, I guess, for both of them. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to say that one. It's called Another. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
Another Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Another World. Yeah.
Have you heard it recently?
I did actually. When I was searching, I had a social thing with some friends. I don't really know these guys as class I'm going to, and they found out that I used to be an actor. And when we were playing poker, and they said, "Hey, why don't you see if you can find some of the scenes that you're in?" So they gave me a computer, and I came up with a few. I didn't find anything from so weird, but then I went back, because I didn't even try that night, because Disney just generally tends to take them down. And so I went and I thought, I'll just see if I can find something. And I did. And of course, they weren't really great quality, but that's when I started seeing the comments. And I've noticed, probably your comments before, people's comments underneath the YouTube videos. So I knew that there was a really, really strong and vibrant fan base. What was the question again? I think I've gotten off on a tangent here.
Oh, Jimmy just asked if you heard the song recently.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, I went. I listened to that episode and watched it, and I hadn't seen that in a long time. And so that's, I guess, I was watching the episodes and I started to sort of just have some memories, and I decided, I think that's when I decided to go and take a look at the podcast with John Cooksey, because someone probably mentioned it in the comments underneath, and that's when I started sort of going in and just listening to what you guys were saying, and I was very moved by all of that. I have to say, I had no idea that the show had that much of an effect on people. And it was really kind of a gift to me to realize that. So thank you for that.
Thank you for being part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
You've been a part of our lives for the last 20 years, just so you know.
I didn't know that. Oh yeah.
Really, I grew up with you. And you don't
know.
know that.
So there's some fans such as Captain I'm Fangirling on Tumblr and Heart and Soul on YouTube. They're wondering, like, do you prefer the original twin ending or the new one that got reshot?
Oh, I would have to say the original. Much as I know that you guys mentioned, you made comments about the fact that at least it gave you some sort of closure, the reshot one. I always felt, and I never really watched any of the third season, so I don't really know what it looked like. I only know what people have said about it. And I don't want to say anything disparaging about it. I mean, people work really hard on the shows and everything like that, but I just know that you guys were disappointed, and I was disappointed that it didn't happen. Yeah, I really would have loved to have seen that original ending. It would have been pretty cool considering it was a Disney show and all of the un-Disney-like qualities of this show that I guess came from John Cooksey and some of the other people writing. But yeah, it was quite unique that way. And I just love the fact that they were able to put so much into those 24 minutes. Those 24 minutes were just jam-packed with stuff that it was never dull. It was always really quite entertaining. And just rewatching them again, I was struck by that fact. Twin comes to mind, just the way when she gets pushed over the edge by the demonic three-headed monster, and the music stops, and there's just like this eerie sort of stillness, and then the music comes in again at certain points, and just all of that editing and all of the way that they put it together was really terrific. Quite impressive.
Going off of that, I think this question is a good one to follow up with all that you're saying about your experience rewatching the show and realizing the impact it's had on people. This question is from Joe on Twitter, who wants to know your opinion about the arc with Fee looking for her dad and all the emotional baggage, because she thinks it's really important for a kid's show to deal with things like this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I've mentioned that as an adult, that was my attraction. I can imagine that if I were a kid watching that show, and if I had lost a parent, or if my parents were splitting up, or they were divorced, or whatever that abandonment issue might have been, that frightening thing that they were dealing with, that the show would have been a comfort to them, in that it was something that they could watch, something that they could derive some sort of meaning from. I can see why it spoke to so many of you. And that's why I feel like it was a gift to find out how you guys all were responding to that. Because I never really did know that. I got an idea just by reading the comments. So that arc of Fee, I mean, it's quite heartbreaking, and particularly the way that she played it. She was committed, in every episode that I've seen. She's just so right there, the way she plays those scenes. You believe her completely. She's a terrific actress, and it's kind of, I know that she's probably I think she's doing something quite exciting now, but one wonders, if she had not given up the acting, what some roles would be like, that she'd be playing. I never saw her do anything after So Weird, but yeah, I'm glad that she's happy, and I'm glad that she's doing whatever she's doing, but she was talented, and she really played that role, so that I can see how you, as children, were so taken in by her. And and found her to be an amazing example, to follow. A role model, I guess, is the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I know I started watching the show as a 6-year-old. I thought Fee was cool and I just liked weird stuff because I was a weird kid. And then the show became more meaningful to me as I got older, and then I lost my father as an adult. And then I went back and this show helped me get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting that you would go back to it and reconnect and use it as a means to help you mourn your father, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This next question is from Emily Miller on YouTube. She asks, what was your hope for the series had it continued? What do you think Rick's fate would have been as an actor? Like, what do you think could have happened?
Well, as we know, Disney probably wouldn't have gone anywhere after the third season. I mean, we have sort of talked about this already. I would have loved to have seen John Cooksey's ideas realized, and to have been able to maybe have some sort of a family reunion at the end, particularly knowing how devoted you were to this series as well, all of you people who are going to be listening to this, and I guess I don't know what else to say about that. It's we all feel it's a bit of a shame that it didn't happen. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So our next question is from Andrea on Facebook, and she says, "Hello, Chris. Thank you for interviewing with the amazing hosts of this podcast and for your role on So Weird as Rick." So thank you for your role as Rick. And she's wondering, is there anything you feel you have in common with Rick from the series? Like, of course, do you believe in the paranormal, or do you play music?
I do play guitar a little bit. I've never done more than actually flirt with music, but I can play. I used to play and sing as a kid. I started playing when I was about 11 or 12, I guess. My father was a tremendous pianist. He loved jazz piano, so we always had music in the house, and he was a bit difficult to live up to in terms of being a musician. As far as other things go, what really struck me recently when I went back and I listened to the podcast and I watched the episodes was the similarity between what Rick was doing and what I ended up doing, as I explained to you maybe half an hour ago now, of going into those ayahuasca experiences and then finding out the darkness that was involved in all of that and getting that lesson basically and being able to learn from it. And also almost dying, from my perspective, that's what happened. And I've never changed my mind about that, even though my family think, I'm sure that I'm wrong about it. But hey, you can only tell people, you can't make them necessarily believe. These things happen, and I really do believe that there is a supernatural. What the Apostle Paul says, we are not fighting against flesh and blood. We're, fighting against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness. And he's talking about the hierarchy in the heavenlies. And those principalities are those very, very powerful entities that have been rebelling against God. Basically, that's what the Bible's all about. It's basically a cosmic turf war. And again, Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, really gets into that. And he's not the only author that deals with it, but it's, sorry, I'm getting off on tangent, but you'll have to forgive me for rambling like this a bit. So let's go back to your questions, and sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay.
It's fine.
We're enjoying it, yeah.
Okay, this next question is from Spencer on Twitter. In fact, he has two questions here. The first, which is, Well, he wants to say that in his frequent rewatches of the series, he realizes that even though Rick isn't on screen often, his moments are always full of heart. He brings a lot of life and charisma to the character. He'd like to thank you for working so well with what they gave you. And he wants to know, did you partake in fun cast and crew parties, or do you have any other fun behind the scenes stories?
The only party I remember going to was that, and I guess it was a dinner party at John and Allie's place. And I think Belinda was there, and Mackenzie, and maybe Squatch. And again, I don't remember too much about it. We had fun. I mean, we probably drank some wine and what have you, and talked about the show and talked about funny experiences. I don't really recall any of it, to tell you the truth. It's just been too long. There was a cast party for the rap party. And again, I don't really recall too much of that. I went and they showed videos and things, and gave presents and things like that. It was fun, but again, it's been a long time. And I also have to tell you that I've really cleaned up my act a lot. But back in those days, I was an alcoholic. I have difficulty remembering things because of that as well, not just the 20 years. So I've really transitioned over the last 20 years, and there were many issues in my life at that time that I was covering up with that alcohol. And a lot of it had to do with my dad and my relationship with him, and another childhood incident. And I didn't even understand what was going on back then. I couldn't have even talked about it. So I just basically was drinking myself probably into an early grave if I hadn't snapped out of it. So yeah, I don't recall too much of the fun parties, maybe because I was having too much fun. So sorry, I can't tell you more about that.
Thank you so much for being so open and honest.
Oh,
Thank you
well,
for sharing all that.
I mean, this is where I'm at, and I am so amazed that I have come out of that, that dark. I was in a really dark place. I was actually, I had performance anxiety, and this is very much to do with the relationship with my dad. I believe that I didn't deserve good things. And one of the supernatural experiences that I had happened in almost 10 years ago now. I was staying at my brother's place in Ontario, and I had a dream that was like a movie of my life. And in this dream, I was shown how I believed, and I didn't know this. I mean, this was completely, it was a revelation to me, that I believed that I didn't deserve love. And my dad was just, he was a good provider. He was just a very distant, emotionally distant man. And I think probably he had the same experience with his father. I'm thinking it was probably one of those generational things that gets passed down. I had no clue at the time, but when I found out, everything made sense. It was like, holy smokes, I mean, for about 5 days, I was kind of morose and sad about it, and then I snapped out of it and went, well, hold on, this is amazing, because I don't have to be this way anymore. And I realized that I'd been set free. This was a very supernatural experience for me. I believe that was just not a regular run-of-the-mill dream. And I quit drinking 3 months after that. I basically really had no need to drink anymore. And I had been trying to quit drinking almost all my life, So.
Wow, that's definitely not an easy feat.
No, not at all. No, I needed to do it at that point because I needed to cover up all that stuff I didn't want to look at,
Yeah, and that's such a relatable experience. I think most people have something like that, but it's just not an issue that gets talked about. So everybody kind of just buries it however they can.
You're absolutely right about that. I now recognizing what I do recognize about myself, I recognize it in what I believe, maybe happening in other people's lives as well. Because you recognize the isolation. I was isolating myself. People who drink to that extent are usually trying to cover something up. And there's usually something painful, And if we talk about these things, it's really important to I realize now, to come out and talk in a community about these things. And this is one of the reasons I take these classes. It's about emotional trauma. And I also hope that I can help other people to understand how important it is to talk and to stop keeping these things secret inside and to get them out.
Yeah, it's definitely important. And I think like a lot of people actually don't have that realization of like what they're doing. It's probably because of something. And I know that John Cooksey wanted to have an episode about alcoholism on So Weird.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Molly, right? To do with Molly.
Yeah, that would have been amazing, but Disney would never allow that.
I know. It really is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, it's pretty interesting to know, I mean, what Mackenzie's been through too. I mean, she is a real role model for these kinds of things as well. And I very much, now I understand what was going on with me at that time. I appreciate so much what she's done, and the way that she's come out and talked about things that have been pretty difficult to talk about. Takes a lot of guts to do that. It's very, very courageous of her to have done what she's done.
Yeah, and now she's also a counselor right now too.
Is she? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
She owns the Breathe Life Health Center in LA. She went to that rehab, and then she bought that rehab after she went to school and became a counselor.
Oh
so
my goodness,
really
I had no idea. That's tremendous. Wow.
And
well,
she wrote 2 books. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't read her books. I can only, I mean, I know she and I talked a bit, and I wonder if she recognized in me, because I had no idea what was going on in my life at that time, whether she saw anything, but she never mentioned anything. But I can see just the experience that she's had in life would make her so well equipped to do what she's doing there. So that's great.
Yeah. Getting back to So Weird though, part 2. Yeah, we went off on a long tangent, but it was all good stuff.
Okay.
So back to the second half of Spencer's question. They commented that Fountain is among their favorite episodes because they're a sucker for Christmas. And out of all of your episodes, which one did you have the most fun working on? And what exciting endeavors are you up to these days?
Okay. Fountain and Twin were the biggest episodes for me. And I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I mentioned my stage fright, and that was pretty intense for me. It was not always enjoyable dealing with that, and the drinking and everything, and all of that being hungover. Oh boy, what a mess. So I really enjoyed the experience on So Weird. Don't get me wrong. The people were lovely. It was really my own personal experience that got in the way of doing episodes like that. And it's part of the reason that I so appreciate some of the things that you guys have said, because you've allowed me to see this show through your eyes and appreciate it from that perspective. And kind of revisit it in a whole new way. That's been very pleasant for me, and like I say, it's been a gift. Those Spencer, those episodes I look at very fondly, but yeah, it was kind of scary for me.
The next question is from Lauren Lola on Facebook. She says, Chris played a character that had very little presence on screen, but was also probably one of, if not the most important character in the series. How did you go about with your approach to playing him?
We didn't have YouTube back then. I think they provided me with videos. I can't remember if I had to go into the studio and watch them or if I was able to take them home. So I was able to catch up on the first season and to get an idea of what was going on with the character. And of course, what John Cooksey told me as well. Obviously, there wasn't really too much to go on because he hadn't appeared in the show yet. Although I think there was another actor who played him in another flashback at some point. And they tried to make me look like him at the very beginning and put a beard on me, and it was really atrocious. And I did just crap all of that, and I played him the way I look, you know. But yeah, it was. I've told you that I connected to the whole aspect of him not being around, sort of the way I see my own life in that way, and how I would want to appear to be if I were like the father that Fee was looking for, I guess. That's about all I can remember, you know, really. I'm sorry to say, but I don't know if that's helpful or not, but yeah, that's all I can really say, I think.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next question is from Matthew Bates on YouTube, and he asks, from your perspective, if Rick had lived, do you think he would have told Fee about his paranormal investigations, and would he had tried to persuade her not to investigate the paranormal?
Yeah, that's a tough one because one doesn't know. I mean, he looked pretty enthusiastic when he left that night. You know, he said to Molly, "I can't stop now. You know, I've got to do this." You know, he looked pretty serious about it. It's at least that's the way I felt that he wanted to be. So you know, it's hard to say whether he would have cautioned her had he not been taken out of his body and experienced the deception, which I believe it was. He probably thought he was going somewhere that was going to be much safer than he thought. I don't think he expected that to happen to him. So I think the caution that he expressed to her when, I can't remember now in Twin, I think he does caution her somewhat in the reshot episode, but he cautioned her way more, I think, in the original, which you never saw. But you have the script, so I think you can confirm for me or not that there was actually more cautioning on his part in the original Twin episode than what he actually said in the one that they reshot. So to answer that question, I think, you know, it's hard to say that he may have cautioned her, but up until that point, he seemed like he was really enthusiastic about what he was doing. So, yeah, I really don't know.
Just like the rest of us.
Yeah, but it's fun to speculate, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of speculation here, another one of Matthew Bates's questions is, where do you think Rick was going the night of the car crash?
Yeah, that's a tough one. He obviously was on to. Sorry, go ahead. You're going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I think like John had the similar question. I don't even think John knew, right? I don't think John knew he hadn't come up that far yet.
He obviously thought it was something really kind of a breakthrough, I think. I think he felt that he was very close to understanding something. And whatever he was doing, I think he felt he needed to do it right then, that he couldn't wait either. I think there was I feel anyway, there was a time constraint about it. It needed to be done now, you know, as opposed to, you know, next week or something. So, yeah, I don't really know, apart from that kind of speculation, what it might have been. So maybe he was going to an ayahuasca ceremony, who knows?
That's great.
Okay, This next question is from Levi from the So Weird forum. Do you still keep in contact with any of the cast members?
That would be a no. I did see Mackenzie Gray at some auditions when I was still, doing the work. We weren't really of a similar type, so it's not like we ran into each other all the time. But then occasionally I would see him, and I can't remember, what the auditions were, but I would run into him. But I haven't seen him in 14 years at least. Mackenzie Phillips, I didn't see again after the episode of Muse, was it? Muse when in the third season? Yeah. That was the last time I saw her, I think. Yeah, so no, I don't.
Okay. His next question is, what does he do, or what do you do today if you don't act?
Oh yeah, I mean, someone asked me this before too, a couple of questions ago. I kind of reinvented myself, I guess. I had always had jobs, as actors do, to fall back on, and one of mine was I was a terrible waiter and bartender, so I drove. I actually worked on So Weird as a transport a few times. I worked with the transportation guys, and they were very kind to me. And I think it was more than maybe 2 or 3 times, and I did that a few times. I was a novice at that. I didn't have the license. They really need you to have the license to drive the big rigs, and I didn't have that. I had a lesser degree of license, so I could drive some trucks. And called guided tours here in Vancouver for a little bit. I became actually a dog trainer for a company here called Pacific Assistance Dogs. And it was training dogs to work with people with spinal injuries. And that is kind of how I hopped into working with people with disabilities. And it was a very moving job. We train these dogs, and then we'd bring people in to actually be teamed up with these dogs, and you'd see them working and bonding with these dogs. It was really quite wonderful to see how their lives changed once they had these animals. They talk about isolating yourself. These people quite often, couldn't go out or didn't want to go out, and the dogs really opened up their social life because people would stop and talk to them about the dogs. And yeah, it was quite an amazing job. And that was a job I got laid off from when I met Gina, and I worked in her store. And I only did that for a little while. That was a retail store for new age products. And there was yoga there, and it was like a mishmash of all kinds of new age stuff. And it was soon after that I got into the work with the disabled, and I did that for about 6 years until I got ill last year. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm not working on my disability, but I'm writing and I'm painting. I also paint in watercolors. As I said, I wanted to go into animation. When I was a kid, I used to do cartoons and I used to paint as a child, and so now I paint watercolors. And I've been doing that for quite a few years now. And that's very therapeutic and meditative, and I enjoy that a lot.
Do you have like any social media where you feature any of your art or anything like that?
I'm afraid that I am a bit of a social media, what's the word? I've kind of avoided it. I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist as well, and I have all kinds of questions about the privacy aspects and things like that. I certainly have thought it would be beneficial to be able to put my artwork out there, so I will rethink it. I have considered it before, so I may do it at some point.
Yeah, it'd be nice for your fans to have a place to reach out to you or get to see what you're up to. we were all very shocked when you reached out after so long, because I mean, me personally, I've looked up a lot of your projects, so I've definitely tried to see if there was any email address or anything over the years, and you've been really incognito for the last 20 years.
Well, as you know, I haven't worked since about 2005, so that's why you wouldn't have found too much going forward. But again, you know, I'm really grateful for what you did, and I was intrigued by the comments that I would see over the years, but I never left a comment before. I'm not sure why. I mean, obviously, I was into other things, and this last time when after I had watched the episodes and I had sort of been reliving some of those memories. And I heard on the podcast the questions that you were having, and I knew the answers, and John Cooksey didn't. And I just thought, okay, well, I'll just leave the answers. And not having an awful lot of experience with with social media, I was not expecting the feedback that I got. So, but it was nice. It was really nice to be able to connect. So I don't regret it at all.
Thank you.
I do have a question that actually I thought of during this interview. I wonder, like, what's your opinion of one of the stories in the show is that Molly kept it a secret that Rick was into the paranormal and Fiona was into the same thing, and he kind of barely told her when she was a teenager, and that, you know, Fiona would have loved that to connect to her dad that way. So I'm like wondering, what's your opinion on that, with Molly trying to hide it to keep Fiona safe since Rick died, doing all that?
Well, I mean, she was being a protective mother, having lost the love of her life. Was painful enough to lose her daughter in a similar manner. I'm sure probably would have been more than she could have coped with, you know. So there would be fear there on her part, obviously, that Fiona would be in danger, and she wouldn't want her. And also, I think, you know, I mean, they talk about her abilities too. She doesn't seem to have any control over it, and maybe that ability that she had experienced was also something that that acted like a deterrent for her and her wishes for her daughter. And again, you know, we're speculating here, but that makes sense to me. I think the way it was written, that she was afraid. Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, those were all of our questions that we got. And I like to end it with 2 questions that I ask everybody.
Okay.
So if the show were to come back somehow for like maybe a 1 episode thing or some revival, would you come back to the role as Rick?
I guess, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that is likely to happen. I don't know that I would want to get involved in the business anymore. It's something that I feel like I've moved on from, and I can understand the enthusiasm that people might have for something like that, and in fact, I can feel it myself. But I don't know that I myself would want to be involved in that. You know, they paid me $1 gazillion. I don't think I would, quite frankly. No.
Okay, and the last question that I like to ask is, what are your thoughts about how So Weird has so many passionate fans still who talk about the show, and is there anything you want to say to the fans?
I guess it would be along the lines of what I think I've tried to express so far, and that is that my own time on the show was a pretty dark time in my life. I do have really pleasant memories of the show. The people, I mean, they treated me very well, and I can't fault anyone else except myself for those experiences that I had. And now that I've sorted myself out and know what's going on, and I can tell my own story and be open about it and feel the healing that's happening in my life, to go back and then to see, because I got out of the business and I thought, you know, I was cynical and I thought, I don't want to be in this business anymore. I didn't feel particularly warm and fuzzy about the business when I left. And to go back and to experience what you guys, and not just you, but I mean everybody that's involved in keeping the memory of this show alive, what they've expressed and what it's meant to them has been really quite moving for me. I was very, very touched by the importance that this show had for me, and that has been like giving the show back to me in a way that I had never experienced it before. And I can't really express how precious that is, you know, what a gift that is to me. So that's what I'd like to say to all of you, and just to thank you for that, because it was an era in my life that was kind of closed, and I hadn't really thought about it that much. And to be able to rethink it and to see it again in a new light has been quite wonderful. So yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that.
I'm crying. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, and certainly thank you so much for coming on the show and being with us tonight, Chris. It's been a very intimate hour, so.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. You know, I mean, I really, I've enjoyed it. It's gone by really fast. How long has it been, did you think?
Well, it's been actually about 90 minutes or so.
Yeah, that went by pretty fast. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
How we like to end it is, I think Emily has said, like, it would be cool if we end it, if you say, like, a quote that you say on the show, which is keep the faith. That's something we always like to think, like, yeah, keep the faith. Maybe the show will come back, and like other stuff like that.
Keep the faith. Yeah, I mean, I think he will anyway, but it's probably irrelevant for me to say that. But yeah, by all means, keep the faith. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.